my name is Hillary Craven, and I volunteer with Power of Work, which is a nonprofit organization which is trying to make the world a better place through employment. We believe in the power a job has and can help people turn around their lives. And so we today want to do a quick little video on some interview tips and sample questions. So I'm going to go over some high-level items to know to help you succeed in an interview. And then I'm going to run through a series of questions. And what I would like you to do is during the questions for you to pause the video and think of your own answer, okay? And then just continue through. And while this might sound silly or you think that you're good and you don't need to do this, believe me, there is a huge power in really being ready for your interview, walking through a lot of questions, and doing this again and again before you actually have your first interview that you want to do. Because by the time that happens, you will be so ready and you will do a great job because you're already thinking about these questions and they're already at the top of mind and you'll have examples ready to go. Have you ever felt like the first interview you do might be botched, but then the next couple interviews you get better and better? That's because you're practicing, right? So let's practice now before you actually go into your first interview. So some tips. You don't want to be super humble. In general, it's a good trait to have, but in an interview, it's not the best. You want to convince them to hire you. You also want to show you're a team player, so you don't want to make it all about you and talk solely just about your strengths, but you do want to highlight how you've contributed and why you'd be a good fit. So you do have permission to brag a little bit. You want to not, take it to an extreme, but being very modest about your accomplishments won't really help you in an interview. Okay. My next tip is do your research on the company and the position. Read through the job description. Make sure that your resume has some of the key buzzwords that you see in the job description. And if you continue to do this where you're reading your resume and you're looking at the job you want and you're updating different keywords within your resume, think, oh, I could use the word collaboration or dynamic instead of what you had already written. That helps the reader kind of feel connected with you as they read through your resume, especially if they wrote the job description, right? And so that's something that will help you really know the position and know what they're looking for by really evaluating what your resume has and kind of changing some of the words to make it really align with the job description. It helps to know what the company is doing, kind of what their goals are so that you can speak to it. If it has kind of a mission statement or some kind of, a lot of companies have core attributes that they're trying to emphasize. And a lot of times, sometimes as they're doing the interview, they might have an interview checkbox and, template of what they want the interviewer to take notes on about the interviewee. And sometimes they will have their core values like on that template and be like, does this person, show integrity? Does this person show this, right? So if you can research that about the company and then really speak to it in your interview, that is going to be a huge help. And then don't give one-word answers if possible. The ideal time for an interview question answer should be about 1 to 2 minutes. You don't want to go on crazy tangents or going on forever, but you definitely don't want to do one word short, just really concise answers. They really want to get to know you, right? And with that, I'll kind of dive into the main methods there are for questions, right? So today we'll be going over behavioral questions, which are very general questions that the company is looking to understand, like who you are and how will you fit within the team. So the main method is called STAR, and there's a very similar version called SOAR, and so we'll go over that. But STAR is situation, task, action, result, and SOAR is the same thing but doing outlook instead of task. So the idea is as you're answering a question, you are making sure that you have a solid scenario, and you don't want to just say like, oh, hypothetical. You want to have multiple like kind of stories lined up prior to the interview, and that you can go to when you answer these questions. So each question should be answered with basically the actual situation that happened, and then what was the task or what was your outlook What did you think about the situation? How did you evaluate it? Did you see it as an opportunity? And then action. What did you do to handle the situation? And then result. What was the end result? So good employees typically explain the benefits to the company and the stakeholders instead of just highlighting how it benefited themselves. And then the goal of the hiring manager is to figure out how you handle tricky situations, which will come up in behavioral questions. They want to know, did you just do the bare minimum, or are you going above and beyond to handle it? And then if you do not think you've been in any tricky situations, that means that you haven't really been involved enough to experience them, or you've kind of been blind to them. And those are not good things. So you want to have really solid situations. And even if it wasn't you that you were super directly involved, and you saw somebody, how they performed in it, you can talk about that. Or next time you are in a tricky situation, you can think about, okay, how am I handling this? How can I handle this? What's the best way to do this? And then you can actually write it down so that when you're ready for your next interview, you will have a very solid example. Okay, so then part 2 now, we're going to talk about some different questions, okay? So I have 20 questions here, and I want you to pause after each one and actually say out loud your answer. Ideally, eventually, you want to write down all your answers, and you'll want to go through this practice again and again through lots of different questions so that you have really solid examples and you know how to answer these questions. And I really highly recommend doing that. I know it sounds silly, but just pause after each one and then give it your own answer. So question 1, can you tell me about... So we are starting with the questions that you are going to ask yourself. And I want you to pause the video and actually answer the questions out loud. And then eventually you want to write down all these answers so that you have them ready. You can quickly review them right before any sort of interview you're going into. Okay, so first question. Can you tell me about a time that you had an issue at work, but it was not anyone's particular job to solve it? For each of these questions, you want to think about what you did, what was the situation, what was the outcome, what did you do, what was your outlook on it, and then what was the action that you did, and what was the result. Question 2. So hopefully you paused the video. Now we're on question 2. What are 3 words a colleague would use to describe you? When you have a question, what are your methods for solving it? Describe a situation you had to change your priorities quickly. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you have any regrets about your previous job? Can you talk about a time you were unable to get your point across effectively? What do you do when you work with a negative person? What are 3 things you look for in a job or company? Have you ever disagreed with your boss, and what did you do about it? When you have a question, what are your methods for solving it? How can you improve? Why do you want to leave your current position? Name 3 strengths and weaknesses of yours. How do you deal with conflict or challenges? Describe a time where it was difficult to communicate with a colleague about a project. How did you approach the situation? Describe a time you were successful and outline the reasons for your success. Describe a situation where you didn't meet a deadline. Describe a time you had to motivate others. Describe a time you made a mistake. Describe any leadership roles you've played. So those are some top 21 questions that I have in terms of that you should be ready for answering anytime you go into an interview. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap in terms of being focused on conflict or your strengths. So it's really important that you have good examples And I think you should go ahead and start thinking about those now, and make sure you write them down and write out different details for it. And hopefully that will help you for your next interview. Thank you.